You might be familiar with the story of the prophet Elijah. He was called to serve the Lord during the reign of King Ahab and Queen Jezebel. He was very critical of their worship of the god Baal, and after a dramatic, fiery showdown revealing the falseness of Baal and the power of the God of Israel, the false prophets were killed, and Elijah is running for his life. He wanders in the wilderness for 40 days and 40 nights until he arrives at a cave on Mount Horeb. Then the word of the Lord came to him, saying, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" He answered, "I have been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the Israelites have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they are seeking my life to take it away." God said, "Go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by." Now there was a great wind, so strong that it was splitting mountains and breaking rocks in pieces before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a sound of sheer silence. When Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his mantle and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. May God bless our understanding of this reading today. I took a road trip last weekend. It was very meticulously planned out, as all things need to be during COVID. I wanted to join in the celebration of my friend's birthday, but needed to make sure that my participation could be socially distanced. It was a bit stressful getting the details worked out, and then it was stressful packing because apparently I forgot how to do that. And then it was stressful getting on the road. I prayed to God that all this stress would be worth it, that my effort would pay off. I had a 6-hour drive, so the night before, I downloaded my audiobook, I downloaded my podcasts, and I had already picked out some music that I wanted to listen to. I started out in silence as I got into the groove of the trip, but then something odd happened. I had no desire to turn on any sound. Instead, I preferred to be lost in my thoughts, noticing the changing landscape, taking time to process so much that has been going on in our world, and I was relishing the silence. I can't say it was sheer silence, not with road noise and passing cars and trucks, but it was meditative. I was zooming along, but it was still. I had space to breathe. It was space that I didn't even know that I needed. It was a deep breath, a time to talk to God, to think, to listen, and to hear myself think. I've been doing these online workout classes during quarantine, and the instructor will often say, "Don't forget to breathe." It's not until she says this that I realize I've been holding my breath. So I let out a big exhale. It's easy to forget to breathe during a workout when the body is under so much stress and tension. It's easy to forget to breathe during these days when the mind is under so much stress and tension. Don't forget to breathe. Our world is in an uproar. The earth is changing. The mountains are shaking. The waters are roaring. How can we face these days? How can we hear the voice of God in the midst of chaos? How can we retreat, recuperate, rest, stay resilient? Be still and know that I am God, our psalmist says. I am exalted among the nations. I am exalted in the earth. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge. Don't forget to breathe. It's important to name that the ability to retreat, recuperate, and rest is a privilege. I mentioned to a pastor colleague about my exhaustion at navigating all the COVID restrictions, and he reminded me that it's a glimpse into the exhaustion of what people of color experience their entire lives, with the additional navigation they face as they work through systems and societies that are not set up to work in their favor. I mentioned to another pastor colleague that we are doing a summer sermon series on resilience, and she commented on the reality that Black people have to be resilient their entire lives, not just during pandemics or particularly difficult seasons. It's no wonder that Jesus was so intent on stepping away and getting a moment to reboot whenever he could. He was always standing with the outcast and the oppressed, and with all the energy he expended on teaching and healing, he had to constantly be refilling his well, resting his spirit, and taking those deep breaths. The prophet Elijah also needed to get away. He was scared, running for his life, hiding in a cave. And in the midst of his distress, his fear, his anxiety, God was passing by. But God was not in the crazy strong wind. God was not in the earthquake. God was not in the fire. God was not in the chaos. God was not in the endless news cycle or the social media feed or the Insta stories or the YouTube videos or the debates or the accusations or the gongs and cymbals. After all the chaos, sheer silence. The NIV translation says, a gentle whisper. Only when Elijah hears this does he cover his face and stand at the entrance of the cave to hear the voice of God. Be still and know that I am God. Sheer silence. Don't forget to breathe. I want to invite you to consider something in prayer with me. Where have you seen God at work in your life over these past few days, weeks, and months? Where have you experienced the voice of God, the sheer silence moments, or the deep breath moments, or the be still moments? Maybe it's not literal silence for you, but where have you felt in tune with God or awake to what God is doing in your life? It's important to take a moment to think about this because we trust that God is at work, that God is on the move, that God is calling you forth. Are you feeling it, aware of it, seeing it? Are you opening yourself up to the movement of God in your life? I want to invite you into some silence with me to reflect on this question. Where have you seen God at work in your life recently? Let's take a few minutes to reflect on this now.